The Eton Choirbook is perhaps the most significant source of pre-Reformation English polyphony. It is relatively well preserved for a manuscript of its age, and it has no rival in terms of scale, splendour, and musical significance. Despite the loss of about half of the original gatherings and about a third of the pieces, the Eton Choirbook is the only substantial source of this incredibly virtuosic melismatic art from an entire generation of composers working in England. The music contained within the choirbook's leaves is highly florid and expansive. The music uses many voice parts with pieces for 6, 7, 8 voice parts and even one 13-part canon. A striking feature of much of the music in the Eton Choirbook is the contrast between the intricate semi-chorus passages and majestic full chorus sections. The Eton Choirbook is predominantly the work of a single unknown scribe. The music is presented in a choirbook layout, that is, that each voice is laid out individually on a double-page spread. One of the most beautiful features of the choirbook is the use of black and red notation and black and red text. The use of coloration, in this case red notes, denotes a change in rhythmic values, the most common of which is the use of triplets in duple time and duplets in triple time. The black and red text denotes sections for full and reduced choirs respectively. The sections using red text are possibly intended for a semi-chorus. An extensive variety of different colours are used for illuminated initials, including black, blue, red, green, gold, brown, yellow and purple ink. These initials were sometimes decorated further with various creatures, human faces and coats of arms. Rotating clockwise from the top left, we see a stag's head on a serpentine body, a winged basilisk, the coat of arms of Edward the Confessor, and a human face. It was copied at some point between 1500 and 1504 for use at Eton College on the outskirts of London. Uniquely for a manuscript of this era, it is closely linked to the institution which gives it its name, Eton College. Eton College was founded in 1440 by Henry VI, initially as an ecclesiastical college, and would later become twinned with King's College, Cambridge, also founded by Henry VI, to allow for the progression of scholars from Eton to King's and of choristers from King's to Eton. With this transfer of students and musicians, there was also a great transfer of musical materials. Eton College quickly took on the role as educator to statesmen of England, a role and function it continues to offer today. There are numerous compositions in the Eton Choirbook by those who worked and studied at Eton College, such as Walter Lamb, Robert Hackenplant, William Bergerman, Robert Wilkinson, and also possibly John Brown. Robert Wilkinson may well have also been the driving force behind the copying of the Eton Choirbook. But the manuscript also contains music from the previous generation of composers, who have no known connection to Eton or King's, such as William Howard, Gilbert Bannister, and a now lost work attributed to John Dunstable, which would be the only 5-voice work by the composer. Nevertheless, despite the loss of so much of the original repertory, this manuscript still gives us an extremely invaluable impression of around 50 years of English church music, from 1450 to 1500, a period from which comparatively little survives. As with so much music from this period, much of what was once contained in the choirbook is now lost. Due to the choirbook layout, where voice parts are laid out individually rather than in score, if you lose a page or a gathering of the manuscript, you will lose multiple voice parts of the work, or indeed entire pieces. We know exactly what was in the Eton Choirbook, as an index survives on the first folio, which includes all items except for 2 late addenda by the composer Robert Wilkinson. Of the 93 pieces that were originally in the manuscript, 43 survive completely intact, and 4 fragmentary or missing works can be found in other sources. There are 19 works that survive incomplete, and a further 27 that have been completely lost and do not survive in any other source. Given that so much of the repertory is fragmentary, this begs the question, what should we do when presented with lacunary polyphony? Should we attempt to restore these fragmentary works by filling in the gaps and guessing what might have happened in the missing parts so that they can be performed again? What can be gained from the reconstruction process aside from the finished artefact? And is it disingenuous or dishonest to believe that we can restore the fragments at all? And how should we approach reconstruction? In one of the earliest writings on the polyphonic reconstruction process, Irving Gott drew a comparison between the restoration of music and that of visual artworks. When restoring artworks, do you sketch in blank areas against which the surviving fragments may shine their true colours? Or might we instead seek to fill the missing gaps using what we know about the painter's artistic technique, style, and using the fragments to inform what should take place in the missing sections? And how might this apply to fragmentary music? But the comparison between fragmentary paintings and polyphony can only take us so far. Reconstructing polyphony is not as final as restoring artworks. With music, you are afforded more than one attempt at reconstruction, and the reconstruction is conceptual. There is no altering of the original artefact. The publication of restorations in large critical editions or recordings gives the false impression of finality, when this is indeed not the case. Like any other piece of research, restorations of polyphony should be open to revision, critique, improvement, and perhaps even confirmation, should a missing part book reappear in the dusty corner of a library, or a leaf of the manuscript appear reused as binding waste. Having established that we are going to reconstruct some of the fragmentary polyphony from the Eton Choirbook, how does one go about this process, and what is the restorer's principal aim? As Nick Sandon puts it, the main objective of the restorer is to find what is missing and to replace it as faithfully as possible. This is of course no easy task. Using the information given to us by the surviving fragments, we might be able to determine solutions to the obvious gaps. Perhaps a third is missing from the chord where stylistically we might expect. Perhaps there is a contrapuntal device that can be used in a missing part. As Irving Gott reminds us, if an appropriate formal procedure will fit the context in the correct style, it is not very likely to be the result of coincidence. And perhaps there might be missing structural devices, such as cantus firmi or harmony that dictates that a lower voice is needed below the surviving parts, or at cadences that the Renaissance theorists tell us we must include. But of course, what do we do in the absence of any fixed points of reference, when there are no contrapuntal devices, cantus firmi, or obvious missing notes? The editor will wish to look for behavioural patterns across the repertory, and if there is no evidence-based solutions, we must finally use our musical intuition to fill any remaining gaps. And if there are no solutions that appear to work, it may well be that we need to employ one of the most useful tools in the reconstructor's arsenal: silence. Might the missing part have been silent here? Is the missing part actually needed in this passage? And having said that, silence should never be employed for the sole reason that the restorer has not found a good solution. But how can we judge the success of a reconstruction? It should be quixotic to presume that the reconstruction of polyphony will be exactly the same as the original. This would be too much to ask for. Instead, a restoration will give the impression of a work as perhaps it once was, using some of the techniques utilised by the original creator. I propose 3 categories for the decisions that we make in the reconstruction process. The first category are decisions that can be verified. While we can never be certain, these would be the decisions that can almost be proved to be correct. Perhaps a kustos indicates the pitch of the first note of the missing part. Perhaps there is an obvious formal procedure that a missing part must utilise, such as strict counterpoint and imitation. Secondly, I suggest that there are decisions that can be justified. In the second category, there is not the same certainty as in the first. Maybe there are multiple solutions that appear to be correct, and different solutions each follow sound logic. And finally, I propose that there are decisions that can be explained. When all else fails and the reconstructor has to use their intuition to fill in missing gaps, how might we explain our decision-making process in the absence of firm evidence? No honest reconstructor can claim that their restoration is 100% reflective of the work before it was lost. But there are certainly some decisions that we can be more sure of than others. While the primary aim for a reconstructor might be the restoration of an artefact, so often in the reconstruction of fragmentary polyphony, the real treasure is the opportunity to get a composer's eye view of the compositional process. Reconstruction allows the editor to engage with the work more closely than with traditional methods of analysis. And as Marina Toffetti notes, the rebuilder will never cease to draw benefits. In the case of music from the Eton Choirbook, the quality of the lost music is sufficient motivation to warrant the recovery of these compositions. And despite the wealth of recordings of this repertory, there lacks a single extensive study of stylistic attributes from this music. And I hope over the next 3 years, as part of my PhD, that I can begin to remedy this. And I would like to finish by presenting a newly recorded extract of restored fragmentary music from the Eton Choirbook. This performance was taken from perhaps the first public performance of this work in 500 years, sung by the Dublin bass group Peregrine. In this work, the bass, the mean, and half of the contratenor are missing from the second half of the composition. This is William Horwood's Gaude Virgo Mater Christi. I hope you enjoy.